All right, everyone. Welcome to Media Over QUIC, second session. The first one was not perfect, so we're going to do it again. Today's local sports mascot is Spike the Kingfisher, who is attached to the local soccer team, or football for those of you who are not from North America, the Vancouver Whitecaps. This session is being recorded. This is the note well. If somehow this week you're still unaware of the intellectual property implications of you attending this and the code of conduct and other aspects of being an IETF participant, please point your favorite search engine at IETF note well, and you will be able to read about this to your heart's content. We have been asked to note really well a little bit about the code of conduct. Please speak with each other professionally and ideally in maybe a friendly manner. As I said yesterday, speak as if you are having dinner with that person rather than you are on a Twitter thread with that person. And if harassment is a serious issue, we do have some strong personalities in this working group. So if you feel you are being harassed or witness any harassment, you can contact the IETF Ombuds team. And if you would like a more immediate nominal source of authority, of course, we as chairs are happy to facilitate any corrective action. And we have our area director here, Zahed Sarkar. Raise your hand, please, Zahed. That's him. He's the ultimate authority in this room, so you can appeal to him if you are not otherwise getting satisfaction. You are probably familiar with how to participate in a meeting at this point, but this is a good reminder to, if you have not already, to scan that QR code up on the screen and register your attendance to this meeting, which is useful it is important for us to know how many people showed up so we get the right size room. It is also important if you actually want to enter the queue to have any comments. And of course, those of you who are doing this remotely are almost certainly already on Meet Echo. And please remain muted. Well, okay. If you are here and you're on the full client, be sure to mute your computer, as I failed to do it first. And in general, turn off your video and microphone feeds unless you are speaking. Okay, this is the agenda for today. We have Will's Warp talk fell off the edge of session 1, so we're going to start off with that. And then we have some other talks. Like yesterday, most of the emphasis for this IETF is some maybe bigger picture stuff and exploring some new avenues of inquiry. As most of you know, we have virtual interims on a weekly or bi-weekly basis that cover MOQ issues and like small scale GitHub issues. And of course, everyone's invited to those. And so we have a relatively small amount of time for that today.
I also uploaded a set of slides about issue 484, which if there's time permitting, we'll tack on after Ian's deck of issues, unless somebody objects to that.
All right, so that certainly follows under the rubric of MOQ issues, but great. Okay, would anyone like to bash the agenda? And actually, Ian, would you rather we do 484 before your gauntlet, or? I mean, whatever you think is highest priority, I'm willing to defer to the editor there.
No, I'd say let Ian go first.
Okay. All right, then Ian will go, and then Alan will talk about 484 if time permits. And then the closing remarks should be relatively spicy. We're going to talk about upcoming meetings, including our following in-person interim, as well as virtual interims. When you describe, you've been warned. We're going to just sit here uncomfortably until someone agrees to enter the note-taking app there and record our major decisions and other important points of public comment. You definitely do not have to take dictation on what the presenter is doing. That's what the slides are for, and just reference the slides. But somebody to make a note of what is happening. Now would be the time to raise your hand, please. And there is chocolate for whoever volunteers.
I think some of the remote people might not be getting audio based on the Zulip chat. I'm offering that as a Zulip relay.
Thank you, Colin.
Lucas can't see either.
Okay.
Someone need echo? Okay, it might be a Lucas problem.
Yeah, so Will is saying he can see and hear. So if you can't see and hear and you're remote, that might be a you problem. Is Jordy, this is actually a good opportunity to point out that we have an alternate stream, and that is Jordy's MOQ version of this meeting. And the link is in the chat. So if troubleshooting Meet echoes beyond your immediate capabilities, I invite you to use it. This technology called MOQT. And so all this stalling has now given a little more opportunity for someone to decide they want to do good by the community and be a scribe today. Do we have any volunteers?
Should we volunteer someone?
Someone may be about to be volunteered if we don't have any progress. Thank you, Ian. Can we? Yes.
And Luke volunteered also, so maybe.
Lovely. So Luke, when Ian. All right, wonderful. We have 3 people covering. Ian will be talking to some extent. Colin will be talking to some extent. Colin and Ian may have a conversation. So we have Luke as a second fallback. So thank all 3 of you for agreeing to scribe. Okay, that concludes the administrative portion of our talk, and we are still ahead of schedule, so that's lovely. And next up, we will to talk about warp. Oops, that's not the one. Uh-oh. This is the right one, right, Will?
I think so. I didn't put the version on the title.
Excellent.
But it's
okay.
It's close enough. So thank you. So good evening. This Will Law from Akamai. This is going to be a very quick update of warp. If we can go to next slide. What I want to cover again is an overview, because there were a bunch of questions yesterday on our compartmentalization and how we're splitting things up. So I thought a picture or 2 might help there. And then I just have time to cover 2 PRs, one on lock packaging, adding lock, and the other on timeline tracks, which is a new introduction, and then a summary of a lot of work that we still need to do on warp. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, the bulk of the work done in this group is on MOQ transport, which is the layer you see there. It rides on web transport, it's on Over QUIC, and it's a service essentially that'll be provided by someone like a CDN or a network provider. And it's agnostic to the streaming applications, or what we're calling streaming formats, that might ride on top of it, demonstrated in the app layer. So what I'm talking about today is one of those, which is warp. Lock is another one that's been presented. We have a chat format, and there can be many others. So we do need to keep this separation. And we do need that. We have a strong focus in this group on media at the moment, but at the back of our heads, we do need to keep in mind, especially for things like catalog, that it might need to apply to non-media applications. And we already have comments on the list to that effect. Next slide. So warp itself is a collection, is a spec that refers to other drafts. So it refers to the catalog draft. The catalog draft is intended, and there was a good description yesterday, to be like a base class that you extend, right? It's a generic base catalog that can be used for any application, media-centric or otherwise, that might be using MOQ transport. You can then extend it and add in application-specific information in your draft, but we're referencing catalog draft. CMAC over MOQ transport is another draft I put together to how to take the most common media format for non-real-time and VOD traffic and apply it to MOQ. Then we have lock over MOQ transport, which is both a packaging format description and a streaming format itself, which is referenced by warp. And then warp has some specific logic, which is how to tie these things together. Next slide. So PR27, it's up there right now. This is adding in lock packaging. So when Warp started out, it was CMAF only. If you look at all the demos being run, including the one coming from Moxygen right now, and as well as QUIC.video, they're using lock. So the notion here is that Warp should use both CMAF and lock packaged bit streams, at least for now. Maybe we add more later, but those seem to be the dominant ones that get us the most bang for the buck. Allow real-time, but also allow near real-time interactive levels of latency. So within Warp, we have a table and we define the packaging field value. Yesterday, there's another PR for catalog to rename this to format. So ignore that. I'm just going against the ID draft, which still calls it packaging. And we define 3 values. These values are in fact inherited from the CMAF packaging. It's basically, are you putting all your putting a whole GOP inside an object and inside a group, in which case it's CMAF fragment per group, or are you putting your frames, chunks, because it might be a frame, might be a collection of frames, inside an object, and then having multiple objects in, having your whole GOP in a group, and that's called CMAF chunk per object. And then lock, at the moment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Suhas, or Mo, it has one mode. You basically put your encoded audio chunk or encoded video chunk sample in a separate MOQ object. If there are more modes there, we'll need to extend this table. So this is a simple PR. Check it out. Here's thank you. Next slide. Here's an example catalog just to show we got 2 tracks. The first one is referencing CMAF frag per group, and the second one is referencing lock. And you can use both together. A lot of people want to use Opus, for example, say with H.264 video, packaged in an ISO-based media file format contained. Okay, the next PR is the timeline proposal. So this was mentioned at prior sessions, but I've actually put forward a candidate here in a PR for comment and improvement. So the timeline track provides data about previously published groups, their relationship to objects, and also their relationship to walk clock time, and any associated timed metadata that makes sense for that application. This allows players to seek backwards behind live into a broadcast or for random access in a future hard asset. You can also use it to link events at times which do not correlate with object boundaries, because that's important. Things don't necessarily happen at object boundaries, especially if you've got one object for your whole GOP. And timeline tracks are optional, and you might have multiple timeline tracks, and you describe them in your catalog, and you can use the new type to say, this is a timeline track. Next slide. So here's a proposal. I've done it with CSV. You might say, why in 2024 are we doing that? Well, it's low overhead. It's easy to read and parse. It follows much of the same philosophy there as using JSON for our catalog. It's simple to concatenate. We use media time, which is the first column as the ordering key. It's easy to debug it without a parser, and we can easily convert this to CBOR if we care about size in the future. So it's got a header, media PTS, group ID, object ID, walk clock, and metadata. You see some examples there. So a player wanting to seek back to a certain time simply looks up in this table, goes and finds the preceding group, and loads from and fetches, if we want to use our, I think our decision from yesterday, fetches back into the past and can play that content. Next slide.
So, Will, I just want to, you have about 4 minutes left, and if there's going to be discussion time, we need to get through these.
Yeah, okay, super quick. So here's an example. I added some metadata, scores. If you have, this happens to be a soccer game. You notice the second one, it's occurring, these are all at sort of group starts, the other one's at an object within a group. Next slide. Here's one with XML aligned metadata, just to show we can take a SCUDdy marker. SCUDdy is going to become important when we try to do advertising insertion, and we've inserted it as metadata, and also at a time that is not aligned with any group boundary. So it's an example of that. Next slide. And here's a reference in the catalog. You can take a track. You say, I'm a timeline track. That's my type. And then we use the depends attribute to describe which video, which tracks within the catalog that this timeline applies to. And these would necessarily need to be synced. Next slide. And here's a diagram, which I wanted to animate, but we don't have time. The blue objects is just group ID, comma, object ID. It's a group with 3 objects. This shows how you can incrementally update the timeline track. So you're guaranteed, if you ask for group 0, object 0, that you will get the complete timeline up to that point. After that, within the same group, you just get incremental delta updates, so you can catch up. And as a player, if you just want to know where you are in the past, you could subscribe only to group anything object 0. You'll get where you are, and then from that point on, you can keep your own record of what's there. But I think this would work reasonably well. I suggest a maximum 30 seconds between updates, so we don't get too large. But that's really bike shareable. Next slide. And these are some of the core issues remaining, which I won't get into now. And I'll save the last 2 minutes for any comment on timeline tracks. Other than, yes, I had Spain winning when I wrote that. It tells you when I was making the slides.
There's a little bit of feedback in the chat about CSV and strings being somewhat annoying. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to.
So they are, if you go, I show an example. So Jonathan, you do need to, anything you put, anything with quotes has to be quoted itself, and the quotes need to be double quoted to escape them. So yeah.
And then Jonathan Lennox, yeah, I was commenting that, and also I seem to recall that embedded new lines in CSV values or all strings are also problematic.
Yes, but I think they're escapable. So as long as we have
as long as we have and as long as we like swiftly say this version of CSV as defined by, I think there's a IETF CSV spec, and not just loosey-goosey CSV as defined by some software somewhere. That's probably okay, but we need to be very specific about the CSV.
Yeah, in the PR, I reference an RFC that tells us how to parse CSV.
Mosinati, I generally support the timelines, but I think they would be better standalone. So if there's a separate draft and a separate, maybe even the bindings could be separate. How you bind this timeline track to other things, including warp, may be a better way to go.
Okay.
Make it independent.
Yeah.
So Will, do you feel like you're close to asking for adoption on this draft or not?
No, we have, look at all the things remaining. Ultimately, warp should be what Jordy's using to stream, and anyone with a warp compliant player should be able to connect to that stream and it all works. I think we're far from that point. So I think first we iron out catalog, we make that robust, and then the next step after that is we need to homogenize, look at common attributes of all the various solutions today, and distill them down into something that warp at least can be the basis for, and then address the issues remaining here. And then I think maybe before we get to some of these, we can call for adoption to at least bring it into the work group. But I think it's a little premature right now.
Colin Jenks. Look, I agree with your statement of where we are on this draft. That makes sense to me. But I think that I would lean towards bringing it into the working group early on this. It's not like people are proposing alternatives to it. It's not like we have 3 competing drafts and we need to figure out which one we want to choose as a starting point. I think this is a great starting point. In fact, I think it's very close to done in many ways. Like, yeah, there's a lot of details that need to be figured out in PRs and stuff, but this seems very much along the way. And right now it's at a state where it's unknown whether it represents consensus or anything else. It's harder to put things in, a little hard to work with. So I'd rather see it brought into the structure and adopted sooner. That said, whether it's a working group draft or a non-working group draft, it's going to be the same people doing the same work on it. So it's not the end of the world. But I guess what I'm saying is, at the point that it's fairly clear this is a piece of paper that's sort of got a shape of a solution that people can live with, which it clearly is at this point, I think that that's a good point for us to be adopting it.
Thank you. I defer to the gentleman from Cisco. Thank you.
Hello, Jordi Sensano. Just a clarification. So are you proposing this as an independent draft or part of catalog?
Not part of catalog, definitely independent. This refers to catalog, and this is an example of a streaming format. Okay. Catalog is not. Catalog is designed to be used by other streaming formats. It's a base class for describing other tracks within MOQ transport.
Okay, then I really like the idea. And we could also implement this without having catalogs. Just make the publisher also publish this track per every video or audio track or group of synchronized audio and video tracks. So basically, we don't have catalog dependency, and I think this is extremely needed in a real world. So I really like the idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Before we leave this topic, does anyone believe that we are not on a glide path to adopt this at our next in-person meeting in October? Would anyone like to articulate this is just going in the wrong direction for that? Okay, so Will, I mean, obviously it's up to you when you ask for adoption, but if you would like to kind of land some issues and like move for adoption prior to the interim, like let's move that way.
No, I'm going to ask for adoption prior to the interim. I think I heard enough here today, and we'll take it forward there. That'll be good.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank
Our
you.
next presentation is
Martin, can I say one quick thing?
Oh, go ahead, Mo.
Mosinati, I think this is a good basis for the working group to start. But my one caution is that in all things describing the media format, I think we have a very small number of people actually looking at that. Even smaller actually writing that. And I can't imagine that we're covering everything properly for everyone. And this is an important part. This is the actual media formats that MOQ is going to carry. And I think it would be good if the chairs can somehow get some more people involved in this work, at least for review, but hopefully also to contribute some.
Well, if we have forecasting, we'll do a call for adoption. The first question will be, have you read the draft? So ideally, there will be an email to the mailing list like a couple weeks before the interim and like inviting people to read the draft so we can have intelligent discussion about it prior to an actual adoption call.
I think to get people to understand what this really is, this is basically the SDP of MOQ. This is the MIME types of MOQ. This is all the stuff that describes media. How we do it in MOQ is very different from everything else that's been done in IETF. Everything else has been done in ISO and ITU and everywhere else. So we need those people that care about that to come here and make their points about it.
So are you saying we need people from outside the working group?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's only the same 3 people that have been working on it for
Can you
a
send
year
can you
plus.
send an email on what communities you think should be included?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll go.
Okay.
Starting at 15-minute time.
Sounds good. So this is a really small, Cullen and myself wrote up a really small, Cullen and myself wrote up a really small drafts that talks about how do you send something related to diagnostics like metrics and logging or MOQ, and why do we think MOQ might be a good transport for certain use cases that came through our experiments. Next slide, please. This is very typical that in any kind of real-time media applications or in general applications that would want to report a lot of diagnostic informations like things that are being logged or the metrics. This is very true in WebEx kind of infrastructure where we do the clients report quite a bit of metrics, and also media servers reports quite a bit of metrics and logging, and our backend diagnostic tools, they analyze the call quality and should be able to in near real-time fashion figure out if there are any quality issues and go resolve to take some corrective actions. And the clients and servers have few choices they can do today. One is that they have an option to report this information near real time or in real time. But the problem with that is that the diagnostic information competes with the media, the actual applications media, and that's not a good for user experience. Our other option is that they do collect metrics towards the end, but the problem with that is and collect towards the end and report. But the problem with that is that either it's too late to do any corrective actions while the call or session is going on, or many times the end users would not even wait to report those metrics. So you basically lose most of those metrics. Or other option is that some combination of both, where they collect metrics every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes in a round robin kind of in a circular buffer kind of a fashion. Once that gets filled up, they keep publishing these metrics to the backend systems. The problem with that is that it brings in the problems of both. Yeah, either it's the time it gets published, if it's at the exact same time where you're generating an iframe, you mess up the media experience, or the time you're publishing is like 5 minutes delayed to figure out what's going on. You miss on doing any corrective action or doing the media quality analysis. Next slide, please. So going one step deeper into the kind of problems that happens with this is that if you think about today, most of the metrics that we report uses some kind of an InfluxDB client that's using HTTP to report metrics, or something like a Prometheus that's asking these servers and the clients to pull the metrics which they store. Both of those things, they're happening in a different connection context between your media and your the metrics reporting or the logging reporting. When that happens, there's a bandwidth compression that would happen. And because you don't have a shared congestion context between both kind of data, sometimes they fight against each other and you lose both. This is very typically observed in the cases where the call is undergoing lossy experiences. And at the same time, that coincides with your metrics in some form or the other, with all those losses adding up with streams, HTTP streams and the TCP streams and QUIC streams. It just makes everything bad. And by the time you realize and take corrective action on your client, it's already too late. And people just give up on the calls. Another thing is that in either metrics and logging, even though there are many granular levels, like some metrics are more important than the others, some logs are more serious than others. But when you report these kind of metrics, they're all treated exactly the same. They are just a blob of thing I want to report at a particular point in time, and I just publish it. There's no easy way typically done in today's systems that would help with some of these things. Next slide, please. So our proposal is we have beautiful transport that we're building that supports pub/sub model, that supports priorities, and QUIC supports nice demultiplexing features. Why not? We use metrics and logging as MOQ tracks. Instead of using separate HTTP client application or server application, use MOQ tracks that's shared with your real media. And we see, we have observed some benefits, and I think that would be something that we think whoever is thinking about diagnostic information reporting should think about. As in the next slide, please. The benefits you can think about is that you have a fine-grained control on what to report. Some metrics are more important than the media, or some logging is more important than media, some are not. So when that needs to happen, your priority that we use, the QUIC priorities for when we use MOQ for tracks, that can be used in a fine-grained control to say, at this point in time, I'm going to report this metric at higher priority compared to other things. The same way, any kind of video conferencing system or streaming system, the media is inherently bursty. You have huge set of iframes that consumes most of your peak bandwidth, and then there are periods where you don't have that pattern. So something like this can be used to say, when media wants to take up the peak bandwidth, consume the bandwidth, it can use it. But in the off period, you can always start sending the metrics and logging kind of data. And because of the shared context, this basically allows us to say, when things are really congested, you don't want to blast a lot of logs and metrics. And priorities along with that makes sure that in the most important thing, which is the application media, will go through. And if there's something really important for diagnostic, even those things can go through. And there's this pattern that's happening even in the way the backend systems are building the logs and other things. A lot of these servers, they collect a lot of logs locally, and you have a server or the collection service that basically pull these logs of those services. But if you really think about it, MOQ in a way, the architecture for the MOQ in a way provide distributed relay and caches, and that can be used for our benefit, where you can report the logs to your local relay or to your cloud server, and that can be stored in those caches there. And the collection service, whenever they want to do some advanced analytics on top of that, they can pull the information at whatever granularity they need. So we think using MOQ as a substrate for sending and metrics and logging kind of information is beneficial. We'd like to collect feedback. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, Martin Duke, Google, no hats. So I guess I'm not 100% sure I understand the communication model. So the idea here is that a subscriber is also publishing data upstream on the same MOQ session that it is, whether it's a relay or I guess original publisher, and then it is being cached there.
Yes.
Potentially, or maybe being passed up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, there's a little bit of a queue, so I'm probably going to close it. Get in now if you want to comment on stats and logging. Go ahead, John.
Jana Iyengar, Fastly. Thanks for the presentation. So as I first of all say that I've been thinking about doing metrics and logging with MOQ
Okay.
ever since I've heard about MOQ, because I think it's a very promising use case for it, especially with live logging. It's actually extremely useful. You have multiple consumers of the same log that's coming out of one place. Super useful. I think the narrative here is not clear though. And what I'll say is that my feedback perhaps here is that there's two different things happening here. You got the media streams. There's a tree, right? Like a distribution tree of publishing and subscription for the media stream, but your log stream doesn't need to follow that same tree.
Right.
It could be following very different things. And as a result, your subscription context is likely to be different, which to me tells me that the shared congestion context is not necessarily a win. I don't think that's necessary for your proposal, but I think it's confusing it a little bit. That may be where Martin was also heading with this. And I had the same confusion that if that's all I'll say for now.
I can say that when I say shared congestion context, I was thinking about is as a media client, I'm publishing my media.
Right.
And today I published my metrics or HTTP.
Yeah, I understand.
So both
that.
are not shared.
Yeah, but just because they're MOQ doesn't mean that they will be shared, because they could be on two different connections because they're fundamentally two different subscriptions. That's what I want to. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, Zahid.
Zahid with no hat also. So I try to understand these things like what you're doing. Like so you have a mock session going on. You're sending live media, and you like to do the same mock connections to use live logging.
Right.
Is that the thing, or is it like you have a separate kind of connection to separate kind of logging center, but you use MOQ as a transport protocol?
So the thing here is that you have a mock session going on. Let's say one quick connection, and in that few tracks are used to send your media, the audio and video media that's been captured, and few tracks are used to report your metrics for the media that's been happening right now.
Yeah.
So in that case, those tracks will have priority and control different compared to your actual media that's being sent.
Yeah.
So in that, from that perspective, it's the same connection context.
Yeah. So if this is kind of like same, so it's interesting to see. Like I'd like to perhaps understand a bit better, like how the logging could be important for media. Like you talked about iframe and all these things.
Right.
So I mean, in some cases, I could see like how logging could be important in media.
Yeah.
But sometimes media is important, and you like to
Definitely.
do all those things, right? So you like to have some sort of like prioritization or consideration,
Yes.
this kind of thing. And if it is a single context, your connection context, I could understand the shared condition control thing. Given that you understand there's a shared bottleneck from other MOQ transport that's happening,
Definitely.
that's one thing. But also you can use like what you use in Scream protocol condition rate control for WebRTC is basically you have a shared condition control context, but you have a prioritized queue. So you actually application decide what to put, given that you have a certain amount of bits to send, you decide what to send. So you don't need like, you can distribute your current like available bandwidth to your logging and MOQ.
Yes.
You can do all these kind of prioritized things. So I don't know like how we are getting into
Right.
that.
Just I can give some context to that, right? We had two implementations of this one where the same media application was using HTTP connection to send the metrics and logging, and mock session to send the media. When things go bad, both went bad because they're all trying to share the same connections, the bandwidth that's available there. So what we did was we tried to report metrics and logging or mock transport as well. So that way now the same congestion controller is basically telling I have X number of bytes, and you know the priority of media is more higher because you're sending iframe and you want that to take over.
Yep.
So that gets the first way to go out. And then on the off period times, metrics, because it's all each track mapped to stream or you have priorities, so they get a chance when they
Okay, so then my understanding is more like a prioritization point of an issue from your like sending point of what you want to do. But I understand like here you're also trying to collect logging from the other side. So
yes, that's
I think
yes,
yeah, okay.
both sides of thanks.
We have 3 minutes, so please be brief.
Okay. Hello, Jordi. I really like the idea of using MOQ to send metrics. And I think the idea behind that to share the prioritization and the connection context to prioritize media over metrics, I think it's great. But I do think that this proposal needs more detail. Exactly what Jana said. Needs more detail because usually your metrics will be in another connection connected to another server than your media. And then what would happen there? So just I think I like the idea. Just this clarification would be great.
Yeah, definitely. We can think about like how's your topology set up, right? And the nice thing that MOX gives is that you have a next hop relay. That would be your intermediate next hop where things can go, and from there it can get gone to like metric server or the logging server or the media relay, SFU, some kind of things, or it can go to two different things from the client itself. I agree with both options. You're right.
I think Martin already pointed out that in chat, but block diagram would help tremendously here, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, 2 points on this. I'm a big fan of it. I really like it from a large scale point of view. One problem though, our prioritization from the last interim is within a connection, right? So if you have separate connections, it's been said already, we're going to fair share between them. So in fact, you could start competing with some of your media traffic. So that's an issue, but it would be no different if we're using HTTP. And the second one is I'd like us to standardize the interface for relays so that you can ask a relay server, it can act always as a publisher of its log stream as long as you supply appropriate auth credentials. Then you can get a standard log stream out of that relay. And I think that would be a nice feature to build into all our relays from the beginning.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Will.
Hi, Gurtej from Apple. Gurtej from Apple. So yesterday we started talking about like secure objects. So it'll be interesting how this kind of goes into that, because there we said that's going to be encrypted using MLS keys. Clearly, this is between a reporting server and the client. So this has to be encrypted using a different key. Yeah. So maybe the draft will eventually also talk about that, possibly.
Yes, we didn't think about in the draft as it is today, but it's something to think about. Yeah,
thank you.
I agree.
Okay, there's quite a bit of interest in this, so let's continue the discussion on the list.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, can you call it?
Oh, you want me to?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay, to be crystal clear, I'm presenting this with no hats on. I've had a bunch of conversations in person with a number of people in this working group, and that inspired me to kind of synthesize a lot of advice and a lot of ideas into one presentation. And it is an addition to the object model that I'm going to call PEEPS. I'll talk about why in a minute. As I understand it, PEEPS are only distributed in North America. So those of you who are not from here, this is, as you can see, this is a shaped, artificially colored marshmallow candy that resemble little baby chicks. The package there says they're gluten and fat free, so I think that means they're good for you. Yes, entirely sugar. And the reason I'm calling it PEEPS is because I think my observation is that a lot of the words we use in our object model have other meanings. People have application, for instance, group. I think people have applications, they use the term group, and a lot of baggage is coming along. So I'm predicting the term that has no baggage in any use case. No one uses PEEPS in their use case. So it means exactly what we say it means, and later we can bike shed what the name is, and I'm going to find or place it to be whatever we decide is an appropriate name. Next slide. Okay, so as many of you know, I'm approaching MOQ as a transport person who is here to learn about use cases, and I'm always trying to think, how are all these things mapping to transport concepts? Groups are, of course, groups are the one thing we have between tracks and objects. And there are one might have a bunch of questions about what the properties of groups are. And in fact, for a lot of those questions, the answer is it depends on the use case. Like, are those objects dependent on each other? Can you have multiple groups of independent? Can you have multiple subgroups that are dependent with each other, but the subgroups themselves are independent? Can you skip objects? Are they in order? And it's all sort of ambiguous in the general case. And if you're writing a general purpose MOQT stack and you're trying to map this to transport concepts, in particular quick streams, it is really hard to do that. Like, can I assign semantic meaning to a reset stream in an easy way? Can I, the fact that streams give you in order delivery, is that useful? Is that a useful MOQT capability? Does a stream fin give you a useful signal? And next slide. And this ties in with forwarding preference, which is that we have 4 different meanings for what a stream is delivering. It can be an entire track, it can be a group, it can be a single object, or it could be a datagram, as many of you know. And you know, there are a lot of use cases out there, and so this does not give you full flexibility to map streams to wherever they need to be mapped to, but it gives you a lot of flexibility. And this forwarding preference is also a track level thing. So if you have if you have subscriber concerns, if subscribers need different forwarding preferences, or if like things vary over time in a track, you really can't do anything about it. So these end of group markers, end of stream markers, or stream resets, fins, etc. Like as an implementer and as a person who, you know, has worked a lot with QUIC, I find it very hard to reason about those in all these different forwarding preference contexts. Next slide. Okay, let me try to be a little more concrete here. It's a use case example. Thank you, Mo. So let's take a certain group with 8 objects in it. And my beautiful ASCII art there is trying to indicate dependencies. So you have objects. So again, object IDs are in decode order, but 7 is dependent on 5, which is dependent on 3, which is dependent on 1. You can think of those as progressive frames in a common use case. And then 2, 4, 6, 8, you could think of as enhancement frames, which depend on each other and also depend on the progressive frames. So there are a couple of ways to accomplish to model this in the current spec. One is to put each object on its own stream and declare relative priorities behind all those streams. That totally works. For some values, it works. I think most people would accept that that is kind of gross in terms of just consuming stream IDs and just having a lot of overhead and like duplicative messages, etc. You could do it as separate tracks, which again will work, but I think also people might think is a little bit gross to have to subscribe separately to enhancement and progressive frames. And then these objects are going to be delivered if you put them all in the same group. If you put the group on one stream, then they will be delivered in object ID order, which means you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which does not really reflect the priority of these things. And if you reset the stream, you might lose things. You might lose things you might want to get. Like if you don't want 8 because you just don't have the capacity for it, like you can't. If you don't want 6 but you want 7 because that's all the time you have left, you can't. There's no way to signal that. Next slide. Colin, do you want to ask a question now?
I just want to flag a comment. I don't think it's really very relevant where you're going here, but I mean, like, I don't really agree with they're delivered in ID order, as you know. I don't think that is what the spec says. And I also think that the basic problem, you're suggesting this is all a problem about how to map groups to streams, but we don't. We map objects to streams. That's the data that goes over. And we have very clear ways to map objects to stream. We can map one object or a bunch of objects called a group to a stream, or all the objects in a track to a stream. And it's the objects that represent the byte. And no, we were very clear about, you can't move bytes out of the middle of an object. You can't have a gap in the middle of it. All of those things, right? So I'll carry on where you're going here, but I just want to sort of flag that I don't quite agree with this.
Okay,
maybe in a way that doesn't matter.
All right, fair enough. I mean, every time I try to staple down where a group is, I get like, oh well, not always as a response. I don't want to relitigate that now.
The point is a group in MOQ, not in WARC, but in MOQ, is a set of objects that is set up to have the properties whatever the application using it wants it to be. And you're trying to get at those properties, but they don't matter to the relay. That's why they're not specified here. So the things that you view as ambiguities don't matter to the relay, right? Because we don't map groups to streams, we map objects to streams.
Do you want to keep to clarifying questions?
What's that?
Do you want to keep to clarifying questions?
That's okay. Well, I mean, I do want to say that I think there's a lot of confusion about the object ID thing, and having had a few conversations in the last 24 hours. So the spec, and thank you pointers to the experts in the room who pointed this out to me. So if you use group per stream, there's a single priority, like the actual encoding is a single priority for that group / stream. So it is not possible to force a reorder, and it says within a priority you have to deliver an object ID order within a group, and so it is impossible to reorder objects on a stream per group mapping. That may be wrong, but that's what is in the spec.
Is it? Okay, hold on.
I disagree with that. We can bring up the text of the spec right now if you want, but I don't think it's relevant to where you're going for the conversation.
Okay.
So I'm certainly willing to 100% table it. Okay.
All right, thank
Okay.
you.
Suhas, given that Colin, is it like a super quick clarifying question? We want to make sure we get through the slides here and not face plant.
I'll wait. Doesn't matter.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so what is PEEP? So PEEP is a new layer of a hierarchy between groups and objects. Like the TLDR with all this stuff is that the idea here is the application identifies objects that would benefit from being in the same QUIC stream. That is that in order delivery is in no way a detriment to them, that the later objects of the stream are useless without the earlier objects, which implies some sort of dependency relationship, but not every dependency relationship is like that. For a bunch of reasons, all this stuff is negotiable. I do want to say this is the intent of this talk is very much like Victor's talk, which is to kind of set a general direction. And if the feedback is that direction is a positive one, then we can then bike shed the details in a PR later. But it would be a big PR, so I want to expend the effort until we're interested in something like this. And the idea is that this is instead of having forwarding preferences, this is the way you map streams. It is an application defined thing. It's actually more flexible than the forwarding preference model because you can essentially do anything within a group, but it does eliminate some other things. Apps are always able to put internal structure in objects if they won't. It will ruin sort of the atomic. If you do too much of that, like you can't really ensure atomic delivery in a sensible way, but that is what it is. That's no change from the current spec. Like subscribers don't actually need to know about this except as relays because all it affects is the stream mapping. As a receiver, you don't have to care about that. Let's see, what else is important here? I think those are probably the main things. But just I want to be clear that there's not a rule that all dependent objects need to be in the same PEEP because, next slide. Applying the use case example you had here, even though there are dependency relationships between all of these objects, I think most people can see the optimal way to map this to have two PEEPs, where like PEEP 1 is higher priority than PEEP 2, and so you will get those objects first, and you will get those objects before the objects in PEEP 2. Do people have questions about why this is the right way to do it in a perfect world? Jana.
So the slide that you had just before this, why is a PEEP not just a stream? I guess I'm confused again.
Because I am avoiding using any term that has any other meaning in networking or in media applications.
But it has a meaning in QUIC.
Yes.
And what you have there to me is a stream, is it not?
If there is consensus that I should just find or replace PEEP with stream and everyone is fine with that with no ambiguity, I am 100%
No, I'm asking
prepared
because
to
I'm
do
trying
that.
to understand if it's something.
Yeah.
I'm thank you for putting this together first because I'm finally seeing it all on one slide in one place, right?
Yep.
So it helps. And as I work through it, it seems to me that basically it is literally a stream, not any more, not any less.
Right. So if a PEEP is delivered over two connections for reasons, then they will arrive on two logically distinct streams. But when redelivered, they should be consolidated on a single stream.
I see. So it's an abstraction that's the application is using from MOQ. What MOQ does with it underneath is a different problem because MOQ is also a quick connection, isn't it?
Well, web transport potentially, but yes.
Right. But then you don't go across connections with MOQ anyway, because you're going to expose that up to the application to deal with. It's an error. The connection closes, it's an error.
So, I mean, what connections are not. So if for some reason a subscription fails or a connection fails and you're a relay and you're going to another connection or another subscription to get data from the same PEEP, then they will come in on different streams, obviously. And you need to know somehow to send those downstream. Ideally, you would know to send those downstream on the same stream, which is why I don't want to use stream because upstream, downstream. But I think this can function without peep IDs, but I think it does have that useful property, and also it allows you to express priority with them, but that's maybe a second order discussion to have.
Yeah, I'll stop in a second, but I think the last thing I want to say is that I think without expressing this on the wire, it becomes, if you're not expressing it on the wire, it's really across connections. I don't know how you can establish state, but I'll leave that at that for now.
Okay, thank you.
Before we go, you were on your next to last slide. Do you want to just cover your last slide and then we can open wide up?
I think people want to discuss this, and I want to leave a lot of time for discussion. Let me blow through these other things.
So I think you were there.
Yeah, keep going. Right. So, I mean, I think what would a PR look like? I think you add some things to the API to allow the application to assign objects to peeps. Forwarding preferences go away. We were just having talk about peep ID. I'm not going to die on that hill. I think it's useful, but we could not have it. Next slide. And like the higher order question is like, would people be interested? Is this enough of a right direction that people would like to see PRs? And like, there's sort of a total solution that like does peeps more or less what I presented here, where like you can have unlimited flexibility to assign objects to streams within a group. And then like a corollary is this, that we're eliminating stream per track. And is that a hill that people, is that a feature that people really need? And if so, we would have to rework that. But, or we could not do peeps and just eliminate stream per track, which I think solves some problems that I've articulated. So at this point, like that's all the slides. Let's talk about it. And I'll trust my chair to like stop us from running off the rails here.
Okay, we have 11 minutes. There's 5 people in queue, and it's not just clarifying. So feel free to like, it's wide open.
Yeah,
rip
into it.
Mosinati, so to answer John's question, I think the way I interpreted this was that at the object model level, peeps are basically subgroups. At the transport level, they're basically quick streams, with the exception of datagrams. And they're quick outbound streams, unrelated to how you receive them in on a relay, but they're your egress streams when you write out on a quick connection. They're the intended outbound streams. Again, with the caveat that there's also support for datagrams. That's the way I see it. The one thing that I've been struggling with in MOQ is to figure out how to efficiently convey temporal scalability, and I don't see a good way to do it in the current object model or in the current wire format. There's potentially a hacky way to do it. Suhas and I had a long conversation about how it could possibly be done with group per stream and singleton streams at the same time on the same group. I don't believe people are going to be happy with that either. So peeps does allow potentially a way to cleanly signal something like that. So I'm not totally opposed to having something in the object model that does that, but I'd like people to think about the temporal scalability case and figure out how would you solve it with the current MOQ objects and how would you solve it with peeps and which way could be better.
So are you interested in a PR on this?
I don't see another way to do it in the current object model.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Suhas.
Couple of things on the clarification point is that today we allow groups to have multiple priorities. There's nothing in the draft that says you cannot a group cannot have objects of multiple priorities. There's nothing anywhere in the draft.
They cannot be encoded.
If they're in their same stream, it is impossible.
Again, we are talking about object model and transport and keeping it separate, right?
Okay.
You can construct a group with objects with different priorities. Now, when you're picking up the next object and sending it, that's where you make the choice saying that, will I send this object, all these objects on the same stream if they're of same priority? If they're different priorities, you can create more streams and send. So today we do allow a group to have multiple streams. Only thing the peeps adds value is that the way we allow today, from my interpretation of reading the spec, is that you can send a stream header group with, like for your example of temporal scalability where you send a stream header group for one set of priorities, which is like the 1, 3, and 5. And then you have to create a single stream per object for the same group and you can send it. That's again, it's totally how you want to transport it. But the spec does not stop you from having a group with multiple objects. Nowhere in the spec that's defined anywhere. But there are use cases where, like some of the use cases where you want to send all the objects of same priority. They're in the group on all the objects of our same priority. Then you can map it to stream as it is. Then obviously by the reason by the way you had your objects in the group and they're all being of same priority, it also has them one-to-one mapping to the stream. That's why group per stream has that confusion. When you take the group and send it to stream, everyone assumes that every object should be of same priority in a group. No, it do not have to be. The nice thing about Peeps is that it will make it very explicit. Now, today in the draft, it's implied, hence the problem for the confusion, which is totally possible.
Mm-hmm.
But what Peeps does is that it makes it very clear. A group can have multiple priorities in it. And as Mo said, for me, Peep is a subgroup. A subgroup size can be the entire group if all the objects are for same priority. A subgroup can be a small size of the group, a given group. In that case, you have multiple streams of each priority, like the use case you had, or a subgroup of size 1 in a group. In that case, it will be stream per object. So in a way, we have stream per group with all the priorities of the objects same. Stream per object also supported with Peep, and Peep also supports something in between, which is I have multiple streams. So in that way, I think we should consider making a PR out of it. On stream per track, I'm not going to. Okay, either way for me.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so I apologize if this is unclear, but yes, absolutely you can do that use case. I should. It's stream per object. If that is with a fair amount of noise, you can do it, but it's totally possible. And yes, it is a generalization of stream per group and stream per object and everything in between. That is the point of Peeps.
Okay, so there are 6 people in queue, 6.5 minutes. So A, please be brief. B, hop in the queue right now if you think you want to get in. Otherwise, I'm going to lock it in about 30 seconds.
All right, I'm next. So I completely agree with Mo that this all comes down to temporal scalability. And at the end of the day, we really added the object per stream mode for temporal scalability. The idea is that you could have a group, you have different parts within the group, like the base layer and the enhancement layer with different priorities. I think that as I think about it more and more, this works if you're watching a single track, right? You're watching a single track and you can prioritize the base layer over the enhancement layer. It really just doesn't work when you're trying to watch multiple broadcasts, multiple different namespaces, and subscriber priorities as we added. So I really think that the object per stream, like all these different ways of mapping to QUIC, has done us like an amazing amount of harm. And it doesn't actually address the end use case, which is temporal scalability. So my requirement for Peeps is that you can subscribe to Alice and Bob's base layer, and then separately lower priority subscribe to their enhancement layer. And that's kind of why Peeps works to some degree, but I end up just consolidating it into a stream per group because of temporal scalability. So I really want to approach this from how do we do temporal scalability when there's multiple broadcasters, as a use case requirement. And I think Peeps needs a little bit of rethinking just to handle that use case because it gets complicated.
So would you like to see PR in this space? If I wrote something like what I presented, can we get it to where
Absolutely. Anything that gets rid of the stream modes is 100%. We can't have separate APIs for separate modes like that. It doesn't work.
Thank you.
Okay, 4.5 minutes and 5 people in queue. So it's please be brief. Please hustle to the mic and try to focus on do you want to see a PR, or this is a distraction? We shouldn't be working on this, or it's the wrong direction.
Colin James, I would like to see a PR that I think is along with the Peeps thing you're doing here of the actual ID. So I'd like to see something where we could include an identifier that when you were doing effectively the stream per group mode, that if this identifier, that the 2 objects with a different value of this identifier didn't end up in the same stream. Okay, we still have reconnection cases and things where they could be in different streams, but basically it identifies the stream, and you'll never put 2 things with different values in the same stream, right? I think that's the better way of phrasing pretty much what you've got there. Now, that's one part of it. The other part of it, though, of removing stream per track, we haven't discussed that at all. It's completely an independent question from this. This is a totally different thing. I don't want to see a PR that does that without some separate discussion of that. That's an independent issue. None of your slides addressed it. I'm probably in favor of removing stream per track, but okay. I don't think we've motivated doing that right now, and I'm really against us going and exploding old consensus. I don't view that it makes it harder to reason about these things or harder to implement. And You know, if somebody can show me the PR that reduces 1,000 lines of code out of their existing code base when we remove the stream per track mode, I might be motivated. But you know, I'm not going to see that. So, you know, I want to separate those as two separate issues.
Okay.
Thanks, Ian. Then Christian, Mike, and Jonna.
Ian Sweat. Yes, I'd like to see a PR about that. In the stream per track question, I think that only is useful for fetch anyway. And so I'm hoping that like whenever Victor writes a fetch-ish PR thing, we just say like, if you're asking for stuff in the past, you're going to get it at line rate. The only way to do flow control at line rate is to put it in a stream. And that's the answer. And that will naturally kill it. And also keep it around for the case that we actually kind of wanted it in the first place, but we, I think, weren't fully able to express. Yeah, I see this as a generalization of what we have and just kind of a loosening of the rules. Actually, when we added forwarding preference, I thought you could do a bunch of this stuff, but then we added more and more rules about what you couldn't do. And then we kind of got into this awkward space word.
Yeah.
So anyway, this seems like a net simplification. And thinking about the 3 modes as an editor is annoying because like you're constantly thinking about like edge cases in different modes.
Yeah. So given the feedback on stream per track, I think I'll just reduce from your preference to an enum of stream per peep and stream per track, and then we can fight out whether stream per track is valuable separately. Christian.
Christian Ritema. I kind of like what you're proposing because what I really believe that the tension is that the model of groups and sequence number and tracks does not capture the temporal, the 2 dimension of dependencies, the graph that you're making. They might be more accurate. They may be 3 dimension in some cases, but leaving by that. So effectively what you get is something like you have a stream per group and per priority level. And that's my case.
Yes.
And I kind of like that. What I struggle with is that your encoding of the temporal dependency between the different levels seem to be implicit. And I'd like to make it explicit so that we can understand it.
Well, I mean, so this is a little bit of a spelling issue, I guess, but one reason that I would like to have explicit peep IDs is we could use that as the low order bits of priority, of our priority integer. So that the peep ID would be unique to a group, right? It's in the group scope. And the lowest peep ID is the highest priority, for instance. I mean, it's many ways to spell this, but that's the most straightforward thing I could think of.
I think that if we can use that so that we don't have to have multiple tracks for the same video,
yeah,
then that will be a gain.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mike, and then John has the last word. And we're a little bit over time, so please continue being brief.
Yeah, I like this. Thank you for writing it up. I do think that this helps us move towards simplifying forwarding preference. And yeah, I'd be happy to help with PR text or anything like that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Jonna.
Very quickly, first thing, everybody loves a new level of indirection. So it's always fun to see that percolate, except that if you don't define it well, there'll be lots of questions and more problems. So I think a couple of things. First, I have a lot of thoughts and questions which I don't want to ask at the mic, but I'm going to offer to work with you on clarifying those and maybe help you with clarifying them in whatever it is that you're writing. Because I think it's really important to make sure that the abstraction is written in the context of the abstractions we already have. So, you know, it's a thing about like we know in QUIC there's bits, bytes, streams, and connections, and peeps have to fall somewhere in there. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Similarly, we've got tracks, groups, and objects, and peeps have to fall somewhere in there for it to make sense. So I think if we articulate it well, we can actually find a better name than peeps. I think until then, keeping peeps is better. Yes. But the articulation of what the abstraction actually is should help us with that. But thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, I have a strong signal, I think, to do a PR, which I guess guarantees nothing, but like I will beaver away on one. Thank you for your offer of help, Jonna, and we'll see what people think. And I just want to make clear that I'm not married to any particular detail of this proposal, and so I'm very, very malleable on like almost every one of those details. Thanks. So I think Zafar is next.
All right, thanks, Martin. Zafar, do you want me to share slides for you?
Yes, please. Hi.
Or do you want to, Martin? Okay. Well, you don't trust me. It's too important. Ah.
Okay, before starting, let me introduce myself. I'm Zafer from Özyeğin University from Istanbul. I'm a PhD student, and my supervisor is Ali Beyan. Today, we will present our draft about track switching and over QUIC transport. There's a proposal that we propose. Please, next slide, please. So actually now we implemented Lux and Mike's code, MOQ RS and MOQ POP for our testbed. So we started to develop a testbed to compare the performances of Dash.js and the MOQ player. And we implemented ABR and track switching, but we faced some problems in switching actually under congested scenarios. So when switching two tracks between two tracks, so we faced this problem. So there wasn't a seamless tracking, switching between them. So the problem is that the relays are unaware when two tracks are alternates, and we needed to send two consecutive subscribe messages to the relay. A subscribe message, and then when we get data from the relay, last mile relay, we send an unsubscribe message to the relay. But that resulted in two parallel tracks being transmitted from the relay, and that caused a bitrate spike in the congested network. Next slide, please. So our solution is very easy. So the end subscriber hints to the last mile relay about its intent to switch to a new track, so that the relay can know that it can cancel the current track, which is hinted by the end subscriber in the subscribe message. So whenever the new track is ready in the cache, it can send subscribe OK to the end subscriber, so that the client receives this OK message, and then it can switch seamlessly. Next slide, please. So there are two different variations about our solution. The first solution is using alt track group identifier in the subscribe message. So it's the identifier for a group of alternative tracks within the scope of a track namespace. Next slide, please. Second solution is a little bit easier. It's switch track alias. Switch track alias is an optional parameter. Again, it's the track alias of the active subscription, so that when it's received by the relay, the track that has this alias is cancelled, and then subscribe OK message sent to the end subscriber. So we have some preliminary results. It seems that it's working. So now we are continuing our tests. So that's all. Thank you.
All right, we got time for a few questions. Kota.
Hello, it's Kota. So we've already had a go away control messages, right? And when it happens, subscriber just unsubscribe from the old tracks and create the new tracks. So I don't really come up with the cases where the relays are unaware that the subscriber so there's like a duplication of subscribers and duplication of tracks. I don't come up with the cases.
So whenever you actually, for instance, for a video player, so you have one active track, for instance, for a low resolution event, and you want to switch to a new track. So these are two different subscriptions, right? So you need to send two different independent subscribe messages to the relay. So these are in the view of the relay, these are two different subscribe messages. So you can get parallel tracks. There's nothing that prevents you from doing it in the proposal. But if you want just one active subscription at one time, like a video track, so you need to hint to the relay so that the relay can know and can end the other tracks. So that's the idea.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
The queue is filling fast, so get in. I'm going to close it soon. Oh, thank you.
So, Zafar, I just want to make the same comment I made in the email thread. I think our existing APIs can do this for us efficiently by using a subscribe update. So if you're in track A and you need to switch, and you have an open subscription on track A, you can do a subscribe update to terminate it at, say, the next group, which you know what it is, say group 73. And then you do a subscription for track B starting at group 74. So that'll stop you transmitting duplicate data on the wire. And the existing APIs allow us to do this. We don't need a new extension to allow it.
Yeah, it seems possible, but as I replied in my email, that if the track that the new track is not in the cache, and you cannot know if it's in the cache or not, so that the unsubscriber will signal the group ID, as you said. But if that group is not in the cache, then what will you do? So you need to continuously stream the other track so that there can be seamless switching. If it's not in the cache, we have a problem. That's why we wanted to give the control to the relay to cancel the stream whenever it wants, whenever it's ready to stream the new track, when it's in the cache.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Cisco. Jafar, thanks for the presentation. At a high level, I agree this is a problem needs to be solved. But on the other hand, I have few concerns about the thinking around it. I don't think so. At the MOQ layer, we should put semantics on the tracks for the relays to understand the relationship between the tracks. Like some tracks might be alternate, sometimes dependent. We don't as much as we put less baggage on MOQ relays to understand how the tracks are related is good. That keeps them independent and gives the application the innovation to do it. On the other hand, like a while back, I think there's still open PR, which I think Alan also suggested some improvements on top of that, wherein to solve the problem of warming your caches with all the qualities that you need, there was a proposal wherein you can do subscribe for all the qualities that you need at one go, like send multiple subscribes with saying, I want to freeze everything except the lowest quality or the highest quality, whatever it is. At any point in time, you want to switch, you send an update saying, I want to unfreeze the other one. So some that will basically keeps the track idea for the relay independent of each other. It's not burdened with semantics. And we do use that in the cases where we want our local relay that's running in our house to have multiple tracks, all the data coming from the cache from the original publisher. And we are in a bad Wi-Fi network, and we don't want all the 3 tracks or 3 qualities to come from everyone, right? In that case, what we do is that we freeze everything other than the low quality, and when you get better, we ask for, okay, I'm good to get the other things. So that would give, as an experience for the end user, it will give an immediate switch to the highest quality. So I think something on those lines, or some form of the design we can come, but as on higher level, this problem is, I think, good. We should think about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
Colin Jennings, I was just going to basically ask whether you think that, so first of all, I'd like to solve this problem you're trying to solve, for sure. Right, it makes sense. I think it's an important use case. But the next question was, do you think, I don't know how familiar you've looked at that freeze, unfreeze model where you can freeze a subscription. I mean, would that meet your needs, or is there any reason that wouldn't be an optimal solution? That's my question.
No, I didn't look at this.
Okay. Okay, that's totally fair. We can discuss it more then later. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Hello, Jordi. So thanks for working on this. I think, as the rest of the people, I think we need to solve this, especially if we want to solve AVR. But it seems that the only thing that you would need to do a clean switch is an atomic unsubscribe.
Yes.
So basically, send a message to the relay and say, when you are at the new group boundary, do the switch, and then the relay could answer when the switch is done. So basically, we could put that logic in in the subscribe update, or create a new message for that.
A new message? Sorry.
Yeah, so or we could describe that behavior in the current subscribe update message that I think it needs perhaps few more data, or we could design a new message to basically implement exactly that behavior.
Yeah, sure. A new message also can be added. Or as you mentioned in your email to me, we can put these fields into subscribe parameters or the custom parameters section. But there's a problem here. So this is our proposal, but I think we need to solve this because it's a problem lying there. So yeah, it can be. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, a slight agenda bash. Rather than estimate how much the administrative will take, I'm just going to do it and then give Ian the balance of our time. So the administrative announcement just involves upcoming interims. So as many of you know, we've been doing virtual interims on a more or less weekly basis. Alan and I have decided that we're going to use the August holiday to basically go to a bi-weekly rhythm. And then once we come to September, we'll go back to weekly. Does anyone have a problem with that? Okay. And those have been typically Wednesday mornings at 9 o'clock PST, Pacific time, whatever, daylight or not, whatever that is in UTC, I don't know, varies, I guess. And we always invite comments. Just send to MOQ chairs if you think something we're doing with virtual interims is bad. The other subject is an in-person interim. We have like settled the dates of October 1st to 3rd, and we have so put that on your calendars. We've identified New York City as the target location. Do not buy plane tickets because we do not yet have a venue. In Seattle, several people said they were going to look into potentially hosting in New York City. I know Zahed was one of those people. We don't have notes on who else said. If you agreed in Seattle to look into it, can you raise your hand right now? Or virtually raise your hand, as the case may be? Okay, so I know it was more than just Zahed.
I had volunteered and I have looked into it. It's suboptimal.
Okay, right. So if we can't find a good venue, we know we can get Cambridge, Massachusetts. So that is our fallback. So your punishment for not finding New York City venue is having to go to Boston. Well, okay.
There are worse cities in the world, but
yes. All right. Well, so with that, we hand the balance of the time to do real work. So Ian, it's off to you.
Oh, 30 minutes. Okay, perfect.
Lightning round.
Oh yeah, no, I will attempt to be fast. So we've discussed a number of things in the last 2 days. I tried to pick out items that haven't changed dramatically as a result of those conversations, because a number of things I wanted to talk about have changed dramatically, and I think they don't need to be discussed right now. One thing is, should missing objects be required? So a while back, we added the ability to specify that objects were currently not available. And it's not just that they weren't delivered due to congestion or some other reason, but that they were not available. But we didn't actually say that you had to use them. We just kind of like put them there and said they exist. This does create, not requiring them does create some problems. Caching is a pretty obvious one. So if you have Victor's use case from yesterday where, you know, every other object is missing, if you can cache the fact that every other object is missing, that's fairly efficient. If you have no idea if every other object is missing, I guess in the worst case, you would have to go through and do like thousands of little subscribes, which is quite wasteful. The main negative, also as a result, you could infer that any gaps that don't have explicit indicators are due to congestion. So when we add delivery timeout, then, you know, you can basically say, well, I didn't get it, so it must have been dropped due to congestion, and the delivery timeout hit. Consumes bytes in the wire. Anyway, comments. I guess is Suhas first.
I think I'll try to go back to the fetch versus subscribe a bit here, because fetch is a promise that if there's a gap because of something was dropped on the cache, and if it's aware of it, it'll make an attempt to go to the origin and fill if possible. On subscribe, if at the point of time, if you're sending the data and you don't have the data, that's it, because subscribe is supposed to be live. if even telling the other end that you missed an object in between is not going to help. They have to handle the losses anyways. They have to work around it. But for the fetch, it might be useful for if cache has the value that's saying that this object is missing, but for whatever reason it can go at least try to fill the gap and come back. That would be my thing.
Jonathan Lennox, I wanted to clarify, does this the original publisher saying this object does not exist, will never exist, no matter how hard you try, I'm not going to give it to you? Or is it something that a relay could make up if it didn't get something?
It is something either the original publisher would put in originally, or if for some reason, say the content timed out and when you went back to the original publisher later, it no longer existed at that point. So all it's really saying is it doesn't exist now. It might have existed in the past. I have no idea, but you're not going to get it no matter how hard you try.
Okay, so it's either it's gone in some sense. Don't try to get it. You're never going to.
It's very much a negative cache indicator as much as anything. But yes, you're not going to get it.
Martin Duke, no hats. I am in favor of explicit signals and less like ambiguity about what should come next at all times. I don't remember what object status codes we have. If we don't have them, I'd be happy to add. I don't have it yet, and I'm not going to send it to you later. And I don't have it yet. I am going to send it to you later to eliminate any ambiguity of whether or not I need 1,000 subscribes or not.
I'm not sure what I would do, and I'm going to send it to you later. Would you send it to them later?
When it arrived as a relay.
Okay.
So say like I don't have 4, but I'm expecting it because it's object per stream or something. That like, oh, there's a gap here, but you'll get it later. Versus like, I'm never going to send this to you unless you ask me for it.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm curious as how this is expected to work with ranges, because we allow sparse objects. So you ask for 0 to 1,000, and there might only be 3 groups in there. So are you expected to signal anything that's missing? It's fine if you ask for an explicit object, but as soon as you ask for a range with sparseness, what is expected to be communicated in terms of missing object?
So I think there's 2 different cases. One is you, for some reason, have a really sparse space, and you have 1,000. Someone asks for 1,000 groups, and for some reason, there's only 3 in that space. So yes, in that case, you'd have to send 997 missing groups. Now, I don't know why.
Just stop. Why? Like nothing says they have to be incremental and ordinal. They're not missing. They were just never made and never given numbers, so they're not missing, right? I think sending 999,000 things saying stuff that was never made in the first place is not there. We need to re-architect that.
Sure, but yeah, I mean, you can use numbers in whatever way you want. I mean, you could use the full uint62 space if you wanted, but I mean, at some point, wouldn't you want your numbers to be moderately compact if only so the variant would be reasonable? I don't know.
Right.
Like we can make the gap encoding more efficient if we really wanted to. I guess why don't we separate that out? If we want to make the gap encoding more efficient.
It's in ranges and various solutions to that. This is a solution for explicit missing object.
Yes, this is the solution for the explicit case of like this doesn't exist, either because it doesn't exist, never did, or at least at this point it will not.
Luke?
Yeah, I think for low latencies, this doesn't matter because effectively there's ambiguity if this object is in flight or if it's not even being transmitted at all and it will never be transmitted. And I think for reliable live, like HLS dash style use cases, you want to know if the object is not coming so you can just keep playback, like, continue playback. Adding a timer, like forcing the client to add a timer based on some arbitrary amount of time is just going to increase latency. So I think we definitely should have a signal saying, you asked for, group 8, and I'm not going to send it to you. Like, it's not in cache or your delivery timeout has expired. Just tell me that you're not sending 8 so I can move on to 9. Otherwise, my client is going to sit there waiting for 8.
Go on.
So, I mean, so there's sort of 3 different things I have to keep track straight in my mind here. So, I mean, I sort of agree with what Luke said. And I believe that last time we had this conversation, what we came to was there's some applications and uses where like the one Luke was just describing, where you explicitly know your numbers are compact and they're moving along a certain way, and you can put in a marker for this has never come. We can discuss what that marker looks like, but you put in an explicit marker. There's other cases where, and the application doing the publishing knows what type of application it is, and the application receiving the data knows what type of application it is that's receiving this publishing, so they can deal with that. Now, there's other types of applications where your objects might be very sparse because you're trying to use random numbers that don't collide in a certain way because there might be multiple subscribers on a various things. Like the chat application used that in some ways. It was groups, not objects, but it's fairly similar. So maybe we could say we'll never have those ones, but I don't think we can. I think we have some applications where you very much do have some large gaps because you're using hashed things in some form or another, random numbers. They're deliberately large gaps for the application to avoid collisions. And for those types of applications, they know that they probably shouldn't be publishing these marker things because they'd have to publish a billion markers in between things. So I think that's where we got last time, was like, oh, this should be punted up to, different applications will use it in different ways, and we should have a way of communicating this mechanism. Now, note, I don't think the relay ever needs this information, and this is the sort of showstopper problem with this, is if you say you have to publish these, the people that don't want to publish them simply won't publish them, and you can't tell the difference between I'm still waiting for it as a relay and not things. So I think that as soon as you start requiring these in some ways, everything you look at, you end up creating these huge sort of DOS attack type things where a misbehaving client can accidentally or deliberately cause the relay to have to do a bunch of work, far more work than the client has to do. And once you start ruling those out, you just being like, oh, we're back to where we are today, which is basically, you can put in these objects. If you have them, the relay will explicitly deliver them. If you're in a track that doesn't use them, then you can't tell the difference between it hasn't been created yet and it will never be created. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. The hash collision use of IDs is a little mind-bending for me, but I'll like process that offline. I have a question. Would it be useful if we made a property of a subscribe okay, maybe an optional one that like indicated whether these were going to come? So that I have a specific thing that so relay today, assuming we get something that looks like fetch, if you make a request for a big range and it has a bunch of gaps in its cache, presumably it is going to go upstream to try to fill all those gaps. In the use case you just said, where you may have 100 group IDs being used or something out of a billion, I mean, it's going to have to make like 100 upstream fetches. It's kind of annoying. Maybe you wouldn't care.
Well, if you had a million objects in that 62-bit space, it's going to have to make a million upstream. Like however many objects you already have in the space, it's the number of gaps. So yeah, it's going to make and like that sounds terrifying to me. I can send a single request to your relay that causes your relay to make a million requests. It does not sound like a hot idea.
Sure, but if I can cache that something's missing, that I don't have to make those, I guess.
For sure.
Point.
So look, putting this type of track will always have this or not have that. Marking that in the subscribe somehow, or maybe I guess the relays need to know it, so it'd need to be in the subscribe.
Subscribe, okay, yeah.
That makes total sense, like something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that could be helpful. Okay.
I think we'd have to look at exactly what we're going to use that information for, but as long as there was a use for it, I think the clients that are doing the scribes would know it from the catalog. It would be easy. Like, I think it's perfectly reasonable to add that information if there's something useful to do with it.
Yeah, it'd be mostly for the relays cacheability and such. Okay, thank you. That was perfect.
You're going to only have like 2 or 3 minutes. So
I know.
pick whichever one you think you can get through that fast.
I like this one, sure. Currently subscribes are sent on a single control stream, so there's no limit on how many we have. We know we need to put a limit on them at some point. There are 2 ways forward to potentially fix this now, or we can punt it for the future. The first way is to do the QUIC style max subscriptions and add a frame, add a setup param. Fairly straightforward, adds an extra frame, but otherwise is fairly clear machinery. The other suggestion I've heard is to open a new bidirectional stream for each subscription, and as well as putting all the control messages for that subscription on that stream. As a benefit, this avoids me having to write over and over again when the subscribe ID is a subscribe ID that you've never seen before / doesn't exist anymore. Close the connection. So it does remove a ton of like inane error cases. But you basically are reusing the bidirectional stream max streams feature of QUIC/web transport to implement the exact same feature as max subscriptions. I don't have a super strong preference as an individual. I think both will work fine. I can see pros and cons. Luke?
Yeah, so I implemented a stream per subscribe as part of Transfork. It's a lot easier because of Rust. Otherwise, it doesn't make too much of a difference. Relying on QUIC's flow control gets a little bit messy when you start dealing with work that is of different sizes and different amounts. Like if different bidirectional streams have different workloads, like subscribe is a lot heavier than an announce is an equivalent. Just having one fixed flow control limit is kind of a problem. So I think at some point we do need max subscribes. Unfortunately, some sort of flow control to say like the maximum number of subscriptions is N, and that should be lower than QUIC's bidirectional flow control, regardless of if we make a stream per subscribe. I would just to say to Alan's point, I really like the stream per subscribe. It makes the state machine a lot easier.
Okay, so you've implemented stream per subscribe before and you like it, but you're not sure and you think we might need the other thing eventually.
Yeah, I think using QUIC's flow control is just, it's not a good enough match. I don't think you can just use it blindly. I think MOQ has more semantics than QUIC does.
Okay, thanks.
Like a subscribe is more expensive than an announce.
Cullen, Martin, and Mo, we're over time. You're between us and cookies.
Cookies are overrated. Okay, very quickly.
We might need to ban you.
What? Google loves cookies? No. That was inappropriate. I'm sorry. I apologize. What I actually stood up here to say quickly was I think that I suspect we're going to have more than just this limit, and that we're not going to want to, that the limit you might want to set for max subscriptions and more importantly, max announces is probably going to be different than your stream limit. And so we probably need to separate those. And I'd also like to, however we do this, make sure we never end up with some sort of messed up priority thing where the priority of our data is causing us not to be able to send our control messages to say, stop flooding me with all that data. So those are this all sounds good. A design that meant those requirements.
Okay. The latter is already in the text that you should put control messages a higher priority than, yep.
Martin Duke, don't care what you do, but if you do number one, please max subscribe ID, not max subscriptions.
Mosinati, I agree that we probably need a limit. I disagree with two. I think in the earlier decisions about having a control stream in the first place, one of the main reasons was to serialize all of the control messages. So you'd lose that if you sharded them out to different streams. So I think there's more determinism in the way that we have things set up right now.
Thank you. You have given me what I need. That's exactly what I wanted.
Okay, that concludes this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Our next virtual interim is August 7th, so we'll do the rest of this slide deck then probably, unless something magic happens. And we will see you in person, either in New York City or in Boston, or if you choose Dublin. Have a good week.
That was one very quick one and one, yeah, that was information. I think for the first one.